As a law enforcement officer in Georgia, I have come across many strange and unexplained cases in my career, but the one that has left a lasting impact on me is the case of the family who encountered the black-eyed children. According to the family's account, they were returning home from a neighborhood gathering when they saw two young children standing by the side of the road. The children appeared to be about 10 years old, with jet black eyes and pale skin. The family offered to help, but the children refused, insisting they needed to use the family's phone to call their parents. Despite the family's initial unease, they allowed the children into their home, and that's when things took a terrifying turn. The children's behavior became increasingly strange and menacing, and the family began to fear for their safety. The family ultimately managed to get the children to leave, but their experience left them deeply traumatized. To make matters worse, the family's neighbor was found dead the following morning. The circumstances of the neighbor's death were mysterious, and the family began to wonder if the black-eyed children were somehow involved. As a law enforcement officer, it's my duty to investigate all cases of potential criminal activity, no matter how unusual or unexplained they may seem. I was determined to get to the bottom of what happened to the family and their neighbor, and to bring justice to those who have been harmed. The family, with their bizarre story, became my first suspects. But after questioning all the members of the family, I became convinced that they had nothing to do with the murder. Even the children's stories matched up, and I just don't believe that children their age could lie like that. They seemed genuinely shaken up by the black-eyed children's visit, and they visibly grieved the death of their neighbor they considered a close friend. I worked with the family to gather as much information as possible about their encounter with the black-eyed children. We combed through the neighbor's case file and examined any possible connections to the children. Although we didn't find any concrete evidence linking the black-eyed children to the neighbor's death, we were not about to give up. We believed that there was more to this case than initially met the eye, and we did not rest until we uncovered the truth and brought those responsible to justice. As a law enforcement officer, it's my job to protect and serve the community. I take that responsibility seriously, and I did everything in my power to ensure the family who had suffered at the hands of the black-eyed children got the justice they deserved. We continued our investigation, interviewing witnesses and searching for any leads that could shed light on the case. As we delved deeper, we began to uncover a series of bizarre incidents and unexplained occurrences that had taken place in the area over the years. There were reports of strange sightings and encounters, and several people even claimed to have seen the black-eyed children themselves. As we pieced the puzzle together, a picture began to emerge. It seemed that the black-eyed children were part of a larger phenomenon, one that had been plaguing the area for decades. We soon discovered that our investigation had taken us down a dark and twisted path, one that would lead us to confront some of the most terrifying and malevolent forces we had ever encountered. Despite the dangers, we refused to back down. We were determined to see this thing through the end, no matter what the cost. Finally, after months of painstaking work, we were able to connect the dots and identify the individuals responsible for the family's encounter with the black-eyed children and the neighbor's death. We discovered that there were many black-eyed cultists that had been operating in the area for years, claiming to use dark magic and other unspeakable practices to gain power and control. They would wear pitch-black contacts and prey on innocent children and indoctrinate them into the cult at an early, impressionable age. By the time we discovered the cult, there were over 100 members, of whom had been involved since childhood. It was an unspeakable crime against humanity, and it kept me awake countless nights. I've seen some truly awful things in my life as a police officer, but this case is something we regularly talk about. and I still have severe PTSD at the thought of those innocent children who would lead murderous lives of debauchery and crime. With our evidence in hand, we were able to bring the cult leaders to justice and put an end to their reign of terror. The families who had suffered at the hands of the black-eyed children finally had closure, and the community was able to breathe a sigh of relief. But even to this day, there are copycat criminals acting as cultists and committing heinous crimes. This experience has had a profound impact on me. It made me realize that there are forces in this world that we can't always explain or understand, and that we must still confront and overcome. It also reminded me of the importance of perseverance and never giving up in the face of adversity. I think that there's a special place in hell for the people that prey on the innocent. Children, the elderly, and the animals are targets of the cowardly, and even if they don't experience the hand of justice in this life, I know they will experience it in the next life. It keeps me awake at night sometimes, thinking about how something so evil could be happening in the very town I live in. While the case of the black-eyed cult may have been one of the most terrifying and unsettling cases I have ever worked on, it was also one of the most rewarding because, in the end, we were able to bring justice to those who had suffered, and that is what being a law enforcement officer is all about. As a park ranger for several years, I have seen my fair share of crazy animal behavior and encounters, but nothing could have prepared me for what I'd find while responding to the calls about the recent animal deaths found nearby. I received multiple calls from concerned hikers and campers about dead animals with strange wounds appearing in the woods. As a California park ranger, it was my duty to investigate and ensure the safety of all wildlife in the area. But as I delved deeper into the investigation, I found myself in a situation I could have never imagined. I noticed the bizarre wounds on the dead animals were all within a 2-mile radius of each other, and figured whatever was causing these deaths would strike again nearby. I started routinely patrolling the area closely and made sure to visit multiple times a day. One day, I was patrolling the area in question when I saw something huge moving in the bushes. At first, I thought it was a bear, but as I got closer, I realized that it was much bigger than any bear I had ever seen. It was a huge beast with big black eyes, and it had long horns like a goat. The thing must have stood 7 feet tall and had huge muscles. The creature looked like it could have easily ripped me apart. I was freaked out and knew I had to do something. I slowly approached the creature, trying not to startle it. As I got closer, I realized that this was no animal I'd ever seen or heard of before. It had greasy, matted fur and was covered in blood. The more I looked at it, the more it freaked me out. I don't know what to do with this thing. Then the creature stared right at me, and I was in fear for my life. I tried to radio for backup, but the signal was too weak in that area. It was just me and this terrifying creature alone in the woods, and I had no idea what to do with it. It made this awful clicking noise, and then suddenly charged at me. I was able to dive out of the way and pull out my gun. The thing had disappeared, and I took cover behind a tree. I stayed as quiet as possible and tried to make myself as small of a target as possible, as I was trained. Then suddenly, the beast emerged from the bushes and sprinted toward me. I was able to get a shot on him in the chest, and it let out this crazy roar. It ran off into the woods, and I started to track it, following its blood. Out of nowhere, the creature tackled me and pinned me to the ground. I had dropped my gun and was trying to reach for it. It was strong and I thought it was going to kill me right there. The noises it made sounded demonic, and I'd never felt that defenseless before in my life. Its horns were warping my bulletproof vest and digging into my chest. I was frantically trying to get the thing off of me, and I was sure that I was going to die. I finally managed to grab my gun, and I fired one into its stomach, and it let out a high-pitched scream. It took off into the woods, and I crawled away as fast as I could. I was pretty banged up and bleeding, but I knew I had to get out of there. As much as I wanted to kill the creature and rid the woods of the danger, I needed some medical attention, and it was stupid to take that thing on all by myself. I got back to the station and could barely speak. My buddies rushed to my aid and were shocked to see all of my injuries. I explained to them what had happened, and I said a prayer thanking God that I made it back there. One of my fellow rangers mentioned something about a creature known as the Goat Man, that he had found out about it by similar wounds on prey that he had been seeing on animals in the area. He also said that there were lots of reports of strange animal deaths and disappearances that were attributed to this creature. I had never heard of the Goat Man before, and probably would have never entertained the possibility, but as he read the description of the creature online to me, it perfectly described what had almost killed me. As I recovered, I began to research more about the Goat Man and its origins. I found several accounts of people who had encountered the beast. The description always says it's half man, half goat, with long horns and over 7 feet tall. After my encounter with the Goat Man, I was on edge for a while. I made sure to warn all hikers and campers in the area to be careful and to report any strange activity they saw. I was left with a sense of disbelief and fear. The Goat Man seemed like something out of a horror movie, but I had seen it with my own eyes. It made me question whether other creatures might be lurking in the park that we know nothing about. In the weeks following my encounter, there were no more reports of strange animal deaths or attacks in the area. I wonder if the creature had moved on, or if it was still out there, waiting for its next victim. While some might dismiss the Goat Man as a legend or myth, I know it's real. It's a reminder that there are lots of mysteries in the world that we need to uncover. As a park ranger, it's my duty to protect the park and its inhabitants, but I now know that I must do so with the knowledge that there are things out there that are beyond my understanding. I've been a middle school teacher for almost 25 years now, and I love it. It is so fulfilling to know that I have personally impacted the lives of countless children, and the friendships I have been able to create in the process are beyond anything I thought was possible. Some of my old students still keep in touch with me well into their adult years. It's been so rewarding watching these children that I used to teach go get married, live happy lives, and become impressive members of society. In my opinion, that's what life is all about. But there's one classroom that I'll never forget. I'm convinced it's haunted by the ghosts of dead children, and it's been the source of my anguish for many years. I was assigned to room 303, an old, run-down classroom in the middle of the school. It had a reputation for being difficult to manage, with students acting out and getting into fights. But I didn't think much of it. I was ready to take on the challenge of turning it into a positive learning environment. I think it's so important to have this attitude in life. If you let the negative events that life inevitably throw at you get you down, you'll be a slave to it until you die. You must have a plan on how you're going to provide value to the world and be a positive presence in people's lives. If you simply react to life, it will grind you down to a nub. It was my second week in the classroom when I noticed something very strange. There was a cold breeze that would come from the back of the room. Even when the windows were shut, I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just a drafty old building. But then, I started hearing whispers and giggles coming from the back of the room. I would turn around to see if any students were messing around, but the room was always empty. It was as if the sounds were coming from the walls themselves. Then, one day, I saw a small figure dart across the room out of the corner of my eye. I turned around, but there was no one there. That's when I started to get really spooked. I couldn't explain what was happening in the classroom. I tried to talk to other teachers and administrators about what was happening, but they just brushed it off as my imagination. I felt alone and didn't know what to do. When my class would end, I would say a prayer, asking to cleanse the classroom of negative entities and protect myself and my students from the dark forces that were making themselves known to me. But things only got worse. Students started complaining about seeing strange shadows moving across the halls and feeling cold spots around their desks. They would come to me after class, asking if I had seen anything strange. I didn't want to scare them, so I would always tell them that it was just their imagination and there was nothing to fear. But I was scared too. I started to have trouble sleeping at night, always wondering what was causing the strange occurrences in my classroom. It got to the point that I felt like something was always watching me, even in the comfort of my own bed. One day, I stayed late after school to grade papers. As I was packing up my things, I heard children's laughter coming from the back of the room. But when I turned around, I saw a black shadow figure standing in the corner. It was small, like a child, but I couldn't make out any features. I just froze and couldn't move. The black shadow figure started floating closer and closer to me. It freaked me out so bad that I ran out of there, leaving my keys on my desk. It must have been 20 minutes before I finally gathered enough courage to go back in there and grab them. I knew I had to find answers. I did extensive research on the history of the school and found out the building had been used as a hospital during the epidemic in the early 1900s. Many children had died there. I tried to talk to the school administrator about what I had found, but they didn't want to hear it. They thought I was just causing trouble and trying to scare the students. So I reached out to a paranormal investigator and, with my own money, hired him to investigate the classroom. The investigator confirmed my suspicions. There were several spirits of children who had died in the building still lingering there, unable to move on. They were harmless, but were likely drawn to the energy of the students in the classroom. The investigator suggested a few ways to communicate with the spirits and help them find peace. I finally had an explanation for what was happening in the classroom. I started to feel less scared and more empowered to help the spirits move on. I started implementing some of the investigator's suggestions. I brought in a medium to help communicate with the spirits and perform a cleansing ritual in the classroom. I started incorporating lessons on the history of the school and the flu epidemic to honor the spirits and help them find peace. It wasn't an easy process, but eventually, the strange occurrences in the classroom stopped. The students seemed to be at more ease, and I felt like I had made a positive impact on the school. I still think about the experience often. It has made me more open-minded to the paranormal and the unexplainable. It has also reminded me of the importance of being compassionate and an understanding educator, always willing to listen to my students' unique outlooks on life. I never thought I would have a paranormal encounter as a teacher, but the experience has taught me so much. I feel grateful to have had the opportunity to help the spirits find peace and to have created a positive learning environment for my students. It's easy to dismiss the paranormal and the unexplainable as imagination or fiction. But it is important for all of us to approach these experiences with an open mind and a willingness to learn and grow.